What beckoning ghost along the moonlight shade invites my steps and points to yonder glade?
But I always have this feeling of anxiety for any female loved one I'm with.
Well, we thought we saw a black dog.
Glowing orbs, like floating down.
I saw someone up in the window.
And if you come, with your heart as open as a velvet door, and let me in.
Made me jump a little bit.
But there it remains, defiant. Defiant against the ages and defiant against inevitable decay.
It was like the veils of time parted.
Basically heard the sound of horses.
I have never experienced anything like it in my life.
Berry Pomeroy Castle is down a long wooded drive, perched on a cliff above the beautiful Catcombe Valley in South Devon. It is said to be the most haunted and romantic ruins in England. There have been many stories and legends written about the place. A most haunted ruin, Berry Pomeroy Castle.
When you drive down, you drive through the forest, and then you've got this looming castle in front of you, and it's quite magnificent if you've never been before, because you don't expect it. And suddenly it's there, and it's huge, and it is quite an imposing sight on the countryside.
I haven't seen anything, but I always have this feeling of anxiety for any female loved one I'm with. And I worry that something will happen to her if I don't get her away quickly. Unreasonable fear is the commonest experience out there, but I never feel it for myself. That's happened at least with 3 people that I can think of immediately. And it still happens out there. A couple of years ago, went down the path that leads to the road at the bottom, going round to the mill, and I couldn't go down there. And I said, look, if you go on, I don't think I'll ever see you again, which is completely irrational, but you know, that's how it is.
I've only been there once. Me and my boyfriend, just by coincidence, found ourselves at Berry Pomeroy Castle on Halloween while the sun was going down. I don't know how we ended up there, but we walked down that windy path and went round the back of the castle, got in the special way over the wall. We were sort of creeping around sneaking around because we weren't meant to be in there after it had closed. We suddenly heard footsteps and we thought, oh no, we've been busted. We just thought that the guard had spotted us and he was going to get us out, and we were like, oh, that's a shame, but at least we don't have to climb out, we'll just get let out through the front door. So we sort of stood up and brushed ourselves off, ready to turn ourselves in. It's ghostly footsteps. And we got out of there pretty sharpish after that. And we managed to get out before the sun went down.
It was winter, and it was one of those sort of cold, grey winter days.
Yeah.
If you can picture it. And you know, all the leaves. It was that late winter where all the leaves were off the trees. There was decaying leaf litter all over the ground and grey skies, but it was still and it was quite cold, but it's still quite nice to be outside.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good day to go for a walk.
Yeah.
So we parked up the car and we'd only just started our walk actually. We were just having a pleasant chat and just strolling through the woods just below the castle. We both saw a black dog, or we thought we saw a black dog. It was really strange actually, because we could both see this dog just suddenly appeared, and we thought, oh, and we both like dogs, so we were like, oh, there's a nice black dog. I'm looking around thinking, oh, where's its owner? Suddenly, and at this point we were in the trees, and there was very little ground cover and just a little bit of leaf litter on the ground, and it was fairly flat, and this dog just suddenly vanished. Poof. Just vanished.
What, into thin air?
It seemed to vanish into thin air. And if I'd been on my own, I would have perhaps written it off as my imagination, or maybe my brain was having a bit of a seizure or something. I don't know. It was really peculiar. But because we're both there and we were both speechless, like, where did that dog go? And we ran to the area where the dog had disappeared, and we looked for holes or craters but there was just nothing there. There were no bushes it could have disappeared behind. The tree trunks were too thin for it to have just hidden. It just completely and utterly vanished. And we could both describe the dog in quite fine detail. It looked really real.
Yeah.
Very, very strange. And we've ever since then we've always tried to rationalise it and said, well, maybe it was a really complex trick of the light, which brought a really accurate looking image of a dog, and maybe both of our brains interpreted this light in the same way. But it just seems, I don't know, whatever explanation we can seem to come up with is implausible.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it was, we weren't scared really, we were just sort of puzzled.
Yeah.
And it was sort of afterwards, then we thought, well, it's a very haunted place. Could it have been a ghost dog? But you almost feel a bit of an idiot. You think, well, ghosts aren't real, are they?
I've never seen a ghost, but I know there are strange, the energy, it feels really, I don't know, it can feel really nice down there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a pleasant place.
Yeah.
Because in folklore, I think seeing a black ghost dog is supposed to be like a bad omen, or a portent of something about to go wrong. But, at no point during the whole experience or since has anything kind of negative that we're aware of come out of it.
I saw someone up in the window once, and we were having a reenactment day. So everyone was all dressed up, and there were obviously people doing lots of different stuff. And I thought it was just a regular person. But then when I went back up, I realised there was no way they could have been up in that window. It wasn't possible to actually get up there.
Why is that?
Because there's no stairs and there's no floor. But because everyone was dressed up, I kind of just thought it was just another person, I just didn't put two and two together.
Oh, right.
Until later on that day, when I went to go and do the litter and sort things out.
I was on a coach on my way to London, and I was chatting away to the guy next to me. He just suddenly changed the subject onto Berry Pomeroy Castle, like giving me this account of when he went with his daughter at night time to go and sort of freak themselves out, basically. He went in, and this was at midnight or something, like quite late at night. He walked in and he said that they were showered upon by loads of white feathers, like more than one bird's worth. He said it was quite pleasant. It sounds quite nice, doesn't it? It doesn't sound evil spirits. And then not only that, they carried on walking around the ruins. They saw these glowing orbs, like floating down before them. It carried on for about an hour of these red, yellow, white orbs falling to the ground really slowly. I was sort of blown away on this coach ride, thinking that I was a nice, normal man. Came out with this story. Yeah, he said, like, that's why I now believe in angels, because of that experience. I believe him completely, because he had no reason to make up a wild story.
There were stories about Berry Pomeroy Castle circulating all the time amongst us as teenagers. I remember some of my peers at the time recounting experiences that they'd had when they'd been camping at Berry Pomeroy Castle, and being a sceptic, I kind of tended to brush them off. But one that does stick in my head was that was someone that said that they'd seen what they thought was a ghost going along the battlements of the castle, but it was actually moving in the sky, in the thin air.
Oh, wow.
Because the battlements may have been higher at some point in history, and this ghost was walking along where the battlements used to reach. That was their theory anyway. But you know, being a sceptic, I just brushed it off and said, "Oh, you've been drinking too much cheap cider."
They call my dress grey. Has it been so long that this white dress for my wedding day is so tinged with the sadness of my heart that it has turned grey. The colour that is left when all colour has gone. Grey. The colour of wisdom. The grey heads of the ancient ones who we did not listen to. But listen now, because I come in my grey dress to share my story with you. And if you come with your heart as open as a velvet door, and let me in, then I will help you find your way in this world. I will help you. My story is a simple one. You see, I was a girl. I was always a girl. I was always going to be a girl. I was always going to grow up a woman. But in this world, in this time, the lot for me was only ever going to be to wear this dress. To wear this dress and to marry one who would be much, much older than me, disinterested in any of the light in my heart, any of the quick, sharp thinking of my brain, any of the laughter that I might have to share. And that's how it was then, they told me, because I had land. A good marriage would be for me to marry another man with power, and he could have my land, he could take my land. No. I could not walk down the aisle without my heart fluttering. I could not promise myself to another without feeling that meeting of soul meeting soul, or at least friend meeting friend. Hideous he was, the man that was lined up for me. Sharp and tight, absent and furious. And so they were to build a castle for us to live in. Brick by brick they built that castle, the men of the town, all the men around. But you see, my life, as restricted and mapped out in chains as it was no dance for the male either. Because he was never allowed to shed a tear, He was never allowed to show a chink or a softness in his armour. And so the men who built this castle were men who had not wept, nay, maybe once in their lives. The men who built this castle were men who never uttered soft, soothing words or allowed themselves to be stripped open by their vulnerability. These men, the boys don't cry men, the don't feel a thing men, they built this castle brick by brick. But those bricks, they were dry, and those bricks, they began to crumble as soon as they were built. This castle, this castle, this castle, this castle, this castle where they filled me with stories of nights that would be my happy ever after. This castle, where I was meant to be happy ever after. But let this castle ruin fall, brick by blood-stained brick. And let the daisies that are here, the dandelions, the bluebells, forget-me-nots, all the wild flowers flourishing in the cracks and the corners, let them crack us. May we come here through this deep, dark forest where the mushrooms whisper and listen like tiny, soft ears. There's magic here, there's magic here. Deep, deep, stirring magic. But it's not in the bricks that you'll find it. So come. Come and see me. The one in the white, pale dress. Come and see me, for this is where I really live. It's where I live in the ways that I was never allowed to live when I was alive. This is where I run and laugh. This is where I climb trees and I sing. This is where I really live. So come. Bring those who you love. Bring those who love you. Come. You're safe. You're safe here. Stay open. Keep loving. Bring them here. Bring your wishes and your dreams here. I'm listening. Bring your hearts open here. I'm listening. I'm listening. I'm listening. Come here and drop all your sadness. Come here with your broken heart. Come here with all that you need to let go of. I'm here. And when you see that cavalier, don't get distracted. I'm here for you. You can run with him, you can hunt with him, but make sure you see him shed a tear. In that way, you can be of great service. And if you see a shadow and you can't see its human form, know this: the human is dancing somewhere. Dancing so fast that your eye can't see it. So lighten up and dance. And maybe one day you'll be able to see your shadow too.
I'm just very aware of the the strangeness of the actual form of the landscape, where you're in a wood and you're going down and suddenly you're on the edge of a cliff. There's times when it just pushes me away and times when it's fine. Some people never experience anything out of the ordinary and wonder what all the fuss is about, but then we'll talk about a place for the next half hour obsessively. Shows that there must be something. It's so isolated, and you go down a long wooded drive to get to it, and there's nowhere from the surrounding area you can see it, unless you're right in front of it or right below. Except if you're up at Dartington Hall. If you go into the Dartington Gardens over the cattle grid, if you go up the front drive and more or less in the area of the cattle grid, you can actually look across and see Berry Pomeroy Castle. Well, I've never seen anything about this in print. I think it must have been deliberate sighting, because at the time the Pomeroys built the castle, Dartington Hall was already one of the most important medieval houses in the area. And I reckon the Pomeroys wanted to show their fellow landers across the valley that they could build a big house as well. I think it was deliberate that they actually built their castle within sight of Dartington. It means you can only just make out bits of the wall, but at one time it would have been a very visible building. No one's ever put that in print, and I've never heard anyone else ever mention it, but I happened to notice it a couple of years ago.
So I've been working as a chef in the Castle Cafe for a little while now. And quite a few people have narrated to me some spooky incidents, you know, like shapes when they take photos, which appear only on the photo, etc. I personally just, I would say, one spooky experience. Was finishing, closed the shop, my car is parked there. It's quite dark. I'm getting in the car. I've not put lights or ignition or anything. And all of a sudden, all the lights of the car come up. And that made me jump a little bit. And I put the ignition in, and I went off as fast as I could.
When I was a child in primary school, I had to do a project, and I became obsessed with the castle and the legends and the stories and the ghost stories and myths that surrounded the place. As I grew older, I still had a fascination with the supernatural and became a paranormal investigator. I remember when I was at college doing A-level media studies, I was only about 18 at the time. We had to do a project, and it had to be on the most haunted type platform and format, which was very, very popular at the time. And we had to do a programme on a haunted location, so we chose, obviously, Berry Pomeroy Castle. I remember feeling really apprehensive about it. I mean, I'd never done any kind of ghost hunt or anything like that at the time, even though I'd had quite a few experiences growing up. And I was very apprehensive about the place because it stands there defiant against history, just looming out of out of these trees, and sometimes the place can feel extremely welcoming and nice and bright and sunny and happy, and other times the valley can take on a very foreboding nature. It seems like there's like an invisible dark cloud hovering over the ruins. But I remember going down there, and it was an eclipse of the full moon at the time. Probably not the best time to go with no light. But we parked at the top of the driveway because it was closed off. It was October time, and quite nearing Halloween. I remember us packing up all our gear, our sound equipment and cameras and whatnot, and making the long walk down the driveway with no moon. Very, very dark, very creepy. You could hear the animals rustling around in the shrubs and the trees around you as you're making your way down. We got down to the bottom of the driveway by the restaurant and cafe. The castle just loomed out of the darkness, and it had a horrible, menacing feel. I don't know if that was because it was night time, all the stories and that play on your mind, but as we got down there, we had stones thrown at us, and this unearthly scream literally shattered the peace and quiet. More than likely that was an animal, a fox, or something like that, and the stones were more than likely local people in the area, local kids probably messing around at the castle at night. But it did spook us, and I was just getting some opening shots in night vision of the actual castle itself when this scream happened, and these banging stones and throwing stones, which is very reminiscent of Blair Witch Project, which was very popular at the time. As I was doing that, I turned round to say to the guys, okay, how do you want to do this? You know, obviously we were going to go into the castle in the special way, which a lot of people did back then. And as I turned round, they were all gone. These three burly lads, and there's all the equipment all round my feet. They'd hightailed it up the driveway. They were gone. So I gathered what I could of the equipment and swiftly followed them. And as we were making a hasty exit up a very long driveway in the pitch black, it was like horses following us, like someone on a horse galloping behind us, which was very, very unnerving. We left the area that night, sufficiently spooked, I might add, and we returned during the day to carry on the filming a week later. Put it in night vision so it looked like it was in the dark. As I said, we went over the special way, as you could back then, and the atmosphere was just so still and so calm. You could hear a pin drop. It felt like we shouldn't have been in there, and we were walking around the castle filming and talking with our pre-prepared script and all the different areas of the castle and talking about all the legends of the castle. And we could hear these dogs howling, and we walked up to the tower and we walked all around the battlements and the other area and to see if anyone was walking their dogs, because we were very mindful that we shouldn't have been there at the time because it was in a period the castle was closed. There was no one around, there was no one walking dogs, but we could hear this howling, reminiscent of a horror movie. The werewolf howling in the background. But yeah, we left the castle and the video camera started playing up. It kept ejecting, and we couldn't stop it from doing this, and this carried on all the way home until Robert took the battery out. We got home and the footage wasn't exactly what we thought it was going to be. The sound was very distorted, and it was like there was some sort of interference on the camera. But the camera kept ejecting for 2 days solid with the battery in, and I remember Rob took it down to a camera shop to see if there was any kind of fault with it, and they couldn't find a fault. But yeah, very, very strange that the equipment was playing up and we didn't really get any usable footage or audio for the media project at the times. We went into the castle, and as I say, it had this unwelcoming feeling like we shouldn't be there. and we could hear these footsteps behind us, quite loud and looming. We turned around, there was no one there. We looked around, there was no one there, and we decided after that maybe we shouldn't be there, and we decided to leave. But the castle has got so many stories about it, so many legends about it. I mean, the most famous of which would be the White Lady. As the story goes, two sisters, Lady Margaret and Eleanor Pomeroy, who resided in the castle, and Eleanor got very jealous of Margaret, of her beauty and her grace and the attraction that men had to her. And the story goes that she locked her in the dungeon of Margaret's Tower, where she starved to death. With doing research, with interviewing various different people, we found out that there's no actually historical fact to back that up. There was never a Lady Margaret or Eleanor Pomeroy who were sisters and inhabited the castle at the time. But through the research that I have done and through my involvement with the paranormal and the history of Devon, we've uncovered that the fact that it more than likely was the tower was used as a birthing chamber. And back in the day, there were certain rituals that women who were about to give birth had to undergo. They had to go through a confinement. And after the baby was born, they were all dressed in white and they had to have a veil over them to keep them protected from germs and bacteria. And the only place they were able to go during their confinement of 40 days and 40 nights after the child was born, whether the child survived or not, the only time they could leave their confinement was to go to a place of worship or a chapel. Now, on top of the gatehouse, I've been told used to be the chapel to the castle, and St Margaret's Tower is just across the way on the battlement from there. So people have seen this white lady crossing from the tower to the top of the gatehouse area across those battlements, and very frequently this has been reported over the years. And my theory is that this is a woman who's either died after childbirth or during childbirth, maybe lost her baby. And I believe it's a residual energy. I don't believe it's an actual spirit that's trapped, but a memory that's been imprinted into the stonework of the castle, and people see her in white crossing back and forth across the battlements between Margaret's Tower and the gatehouse itself. But St Margaret's Tower, it all ties in with me because St Margaret of Antioch was the patron saint of pregnancy and childbirth. Apparently she was confined in the belly of a beast and she escaped, but she was left there to starve, and I think that's where the legend of Margaret and Eleanor come from. It's kind of been turned over the years through Chinese whispers and how the legend adds and evolves. And I believe it's turned from a birthing tower that was named after the patron saint of pregnant women and childbirth into this legend of jealous sisters and starvation, locked up and confined in the tower dungeon. But yeah, and it also could tie into the legend of the Blue Lady, who is meant to have killed herself after she killed her child that apparently was part of some incestuous relationship. She is meant to appear when someone related to the castle is close to death. And I believe there's a story about someone who lived in one of the houses at the top of the driveway, that when his wife was close to death and the doctor was there, that she came in wringing her hands, saying the baby, my baby, before the apparition disappeared. But I'm not quite sure on the authenticity of that tale, but it's an interesting one nevertheless. But the place does have a feel to it. I mean, I know there's been stories of time slips in the valley where people have come across a child from the past, and the landscape has been miraculously transformed into what it was centuries ago. But the whole place has got It's got an energy of its own, whether that's paranormal or just people's expectations of the place that's been consciously imprinted into the granite is unknown. I know it's been investigated by Haunted Devon back in 2006 and 2007. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of the club back then, so I don't know the details of that investigation. It has a mystical energy to the place. Whether that's down to the folklore, or whether it's down to ley lines, or just collective consciousness pouring all this legend into the place, who knows?
I like Berry Pomeroy Castle, but I have heard a tale. So Adrian, when I met him and when he told me this tale, must have been 65. He's worked for the British Water Board since 16. He's really salt of the earth, steady, kind and quite serious gentleman. He's not one for telling tales, making up lies, flights of fancy or drugs. And I said, oh, yes, it's a lovely area, beautiful castle. Did you enjoy your visit? I think we'd only just met a family meal. And he went on to tell me, fixing me with his eyes, and very, very seriously, that when he was about 17, he and a friend had done a cycle holiday, a camping cycle holiday. And part of their route had been some of the coast of Devon, and then they came and decided to camp in the meadow just below Berry Pomeroy Castle for one evening. So they set up camp, and it was a sort of sunny, hazy afternoon. It was like the veils of time parted, and where they were in that field, they experienced being in the middle of a horrific situation that felt like a cross between a battle and a plague type situation. There were wailing children, crying men, the clash of arms potentially, like something horrific was going on. He and his friend, in the broad daylight of that hazy afternoon, were terrified. They packed up their camp and they left. He was not a joker. He was no way pulling my leg. He was serious that they had experienced an otherworldly time warp, I guess, where they saw back into the past of that area, and it wasn't pretty.
We'd come down, it was a summer's evening. There were four of us. We were visiting a friend, and we'd heard stories about Berry Pomeroy Castle. So one evening, it was a really clear night. It was beautiful, absolutely stunning. We decided to take a drive up to Berry Pomeroy. First thing to note, I suppose, was the fact that the gates were locked. So you have to park right at the top. So it's quite a long walk down down a road, a lane. I don't know how far it is. It seemed at the time to go on forever. And it was, as I say, it was a clear night. It was, I can't say it was a full moon, but it was definitely a large moon that was lighting everything up. It's that first view to start with that sort of takes you away when you come down and you see that gatehouse and you're like, whoa. You know, that's pretty ominous, but still, you know, there's nothing to note, nothing really to be concerned of or to even write home about, to be honest. We climbed over the wall and just sort of standing within the castle boundary. As I say, at the time, we don't really know the stories. All we knew was that it had a reputation of being haunted. It felt pretty creepy in there, but nothing untoward, to be honest. Until in the distance we basically heard the sound of horses. And what struck us at the time as being a bit odd, but didn't really take it in, I suppose, was the fact it was horse hooves on solid ground, as opposed to, you know, you'd hardly even notice it, I suppose, if it was in a field. But it was the distinctive sound of horses on concrete or stone or something, and quite a lot of them. I say quite a lot, you know, there was a few of them. There was definitely more than one. Yeah. It kind of leaves you a little bit dry mouthed when you find out the following day that there's the story about the horses being ridden over the back of the castle. To save being captured, I suppose. The story of the horses were blindfolded and when they were under siege, and they rode the horses off the back into the valley to kill themselves. We went back the following day, and lo and behold, there were no horses there, and there certainly aren't any solid ground areas that there would be horses on if they had been moved. It was all fields.
When I first initially drove up there, it was daylight. I drove up with a friend and we were going to go around and do the tour. And I had no idea, I didn't know the history behind the castle. But there was something very solemn about the place. And when I turned up, we were about to enter and I looked up and on the top floor, I saw an image. It looked like a woman just standing there, just staring. And it felt quite... yeah, it just felt really menacing, and I didn't like it. And then, then the image was gone. I returned a couple of years later with a healer from Mexico, and throughout those couple of years, I used to drive quite regularly through the woods. Each time I'd drive through, I used to have an experience of it just felt really eerie and really, I don't know, the energy through the woods just felt very, very heavy and negative, and it didn't feel like a normal wood. It didn't feel like a normal, forest. I wouldn't want to go walking through there by myself, and I didn't like driving through there either. I took this healer there and I just felt like the castle and the grounds needed healing. I took the healer down into the dungeon, and of course by then we'd read the history. We knew that one of the ladies had died down there that belonged to the house, and we knew that, there'd been some sort of family dispute. I have never experienced anything like it in my life. Very small room, dark, damp. And the energy we all experienced down there, or at least I did, and my friend, was very, very heavy. We immediately felt it on our chest. My chest felt as if it was being compressed, as if someone was pushing my chest. And then I felt my windpipe, it felt as if I couldn't breathe, like my throat was closing. All the hairs on the back of my neck, my back, my arms just stood straight up. And I had the impulse just to run. I had to get out. Felt like I was being, like there's this energy pushing against me and I just had to get out. So I ran out and then my friend followed me. And then the healer, came out slowly afterwards. He didn't rush out. Both of us, myself and my friend, were having difficulty breathing at the top. When we came out of the dungeon, we couldn't breathe. It was literally like our windpipes were closing. We couldn't get air in. I started panicking. My friend started panicking. She went bright red in the face. It was really scary. The healer came up, he saw us, that we were struggling to breathe and that we're having all these, panics. And he gave us blessing and then it released. When we asked him about it later, we said, what happened there? And he said that the energy in the base of the dungeon had grabbed onto us, and that was our physical experience of the ghost or the entity that was in there, had a direct physical effect. And that was the most profound experience I had in the castle. To be honest, I would not go back down there without someone who works with light, without someone who, can manage these things, because that energy was completely malevolent, and I've not experienced anything like that before, where I felt threatened by something.
Berry Pomeroy Castle is a Grade 1 listed building, owned by the Duke of Somerset and administered by English Heritage. Special thanks to Bob Mann, Sylvie McCady, Chantal Norton, Maisie Doherty, Sarah Mooney, Philippe Metrel, Abby Dent, Stuart Jacob, Jenny Wellwood and Catherine Crane. Mixed by Paul Roberts. Produced and edited by Alex Marsh.